Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of ElevateNonprofit.com, an online learning platform for fundraising event professionals. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristen Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. Today we have kind of an exciting topic.
I'm excited.
You know, I think some people maybe think it's scary. Whenever we say technology, we immediately see, question marks over people's heads sometimes. But Rachel is joining us today as a VR filmmaker to talk to us a little bit about how technology can create an experience that our donors might not have had otherwise. We're excited to bring kind of new ideas to the conversation and learn from you today, Rachel. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, you two. I'm really excited to be here.
I love it. And I will just throw out there's the caveat. The Luddite in the room, technology and I do not always get along. And I am here and I am listening and I am super excited about VR. So let that frame it for everybody else who's a little like, wait, what are we doing? What are we talking about? I love it.
Luddite, and then Sam, where do you stand on the?
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
I think that technology is something that is like you have to understand and be a part of in some way because it's informing so much of our life that I'm sort of on the bandwagon of like, cool, I want to learn. I want to see what it is. I don't necessarily want to do it, but I want to learn.
But maybe you will.
Right. Well, I want to participate.
Yes.
I just don't want to have to understand the technology behind it.
Well, and that's why Rachel's here.
And that's why Rachel's here. Well, let's introduce Rachel. Let's give a formal bio here.
Let's do it. Rachel Bracker is a 360-degree VR filmmaker and video editor with a passion for immersive storytelling. At her company, Hungry Mantis, she works with clients to create 360-degree videos and traditional videos for training, education, and entertainment. In her 360-degree docuseries, With the Wind and the Stars, she puts viewers inside the cockpit and on the surface of Mars to meet inspiring women in aviation and aerospace. Rachel first encountered VR at the University of Oregon, where she earned a master's degree in multimedia journalism. She believes VR can help nonprofits tell their stories in unforgettable ways by putting viewers into the heart of their mission. Thanks for being here today.
I'm so glad to be here and really happy to be in a format where I can speak to your audiences, nonprofit fundraisers. This is just like a dream for me. So thank you for having me.
I'm so excited for you to bring them into this realm of storytelling and what it can do for them.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that we bring everybody into the conversation on equal footing. We were talking earlier about technology. People have a whole range of experience, a whole range of knowledge. So fundamentally, what is VR?
So VR, or virtual reality, is an immersive experience that is experienced inside of a virtual reality headset. That is the definition that many people have come to know VR by today. If we had asked this question in the 80s or even 10 years ago, the answer might have been a game like Second Life, where you have a fully immersive computer-generated world that users can explore. But today, for all intents and purposes, virtual reality is something that you put on a virtual reality headset to experience. A head-mounted display is what they're sometimes called, or HMD. And it could be a variety of things that you could experience in there. It could be a fully room scale experience where you can walk around in your space and your body movements are being tracked in real time. You can interact with 3D objects. Perhaps it's a VR game where you're killing orcs with a bow and arrow. Or it could be a 360-degree video, the things that I specialize in creating. That takes you to places that would be hard to reach otherwise, like the International Space Station, for example, where you can watch a story unfold and look wherever you like and see the events happening around you as if you are really there. Virtual reality could be a training simulator, maybe for a healthcare professional where they're practicing something that is okay to make a mistake in virtual reality, but would be very detrimental if that happened in, our real physical environment. It could be something that's shared with other people. Social VR is a concept where you could be gaming with other people, or you could be having a meeting like we're having in virtual reality with avatars, some that look very fantastical, some that look rather creepy. There's a whole range of avatar designs out there. Yeah, virtual reality, it can be a lot of different things. And I think the main unifying factor is that you're in a virtual reality headset to experience whatever it is.
It's interesting. During the pandemic, there were so many virtual events that were happening. And we started to see a lot of software companies come out with technologies that were designed to give you a little bit more of that like networking connection experience at an event. They weren't necessarily virtual reality. You weren't in a headset, but they were trying to emulate a reality of some sort. But the thing that's interesting to me about your work is that you're using a medium of film. So it's not an animation. It's not a like I click here and select that I want to go talk to that group of people. It's that you're creating a whole world in film. And I think that filmmaking and storytelling is something we've been using for a really long time in the nonprofit space as a way to create connection and empathy and take people somewhere they haven't been. How, like, I'm curious about your Mars project. How are you doing that? Like, you're a filmmaker, so how are you getting cameras on the moon and creating an experience where we can be on the moon?
Yeah, so this is something, so the power of 360 video storytelling is something that I'm really passionate about. And so with the project about Ashley the Mars rover driver, this was such an exciting opportunity. So my company, Hungry Mantis, we started making a 360 documentary series about women in aviation. And it was just women in aviation. There was no aerospace in the project scope at that time. So we were getting into community locally in Portland. We met the 99s, which is an international organization of female pilots. And we also met people from the local Portland, Vancouver chapter of Women in Aviation International. And so we were meeting all these pilots. We were doing community screenings with VR headsets. And through that work, we got connected to Airway Science for Kids, which is a nonprofit in Northeast Portland and a few other locations in the Portland metro area, in fact. And their mission is to bring youth into and up close to the magic of aviation so that they can see firsthand there's a real viable career path in aviation for them, whether that's as a pilot or working in air traffic control or as an engineer or even in communications to tell the stories that are relevant to those various industries. There's so many vibrant careers in aviation, and it's not something that's really easily accessible to a lot of people. It sort of feels out of reach, or maybe
it's just an idea, right? Like it's just sort of this like, I want to be an air traffic. Like, who even comes up with that without some sort of experience of being able to tack that down?
Exactly. I think that's a problem that industry runs into a lot. Like, if you didn't grow up in an aviation family, you probably don't know that much about the field. So Airway Science for Kids was started in the 90s, and the goal was to help at-risk youth, marginalized youth in particular in the Portland area, have access to flight simulators, after-school programming that kept them like in an educational environment where they could be safe and learn together, and specifically learn about aviation. So meeting with these different groups, Women in Aviation International and Airway Science for Kids, they had the idea to expand us into aerospace. They had an event called Girls in Space Day, and they wanted to expand it to a Girls in Space camp. And so
cool.
Yeah, such a cool event. And all their programs, or most of their programs, are free, which is amazing. And so the idea there, they do a lot of fun activities to help the kids think about what would life on Mars be like? What would we need to survive on Mars? And what are, they just have so many activities. And so the idea was to bring virtual reality headsets to the camp and have them go through a day in the life of somebody who works at NASA. So through the connections at Airway Science for Kids, they were connected to Ashley. Ashley has worked on many Mars rover missions. She started with Spirit and Opportunity, and now she works with Curiosity. She's the first woman to drive on Mars, and she has left tracks in the surface of the Martian soil. She's amazing, and she has one of the coolest jobs in the world. And when she was a kid, she wanted to be an astronaut, but she had some pretty bad motion sickness. And so her dreams of being an astronaut seemed far-fetched, but luckily she was able to learn about other career paths. So the idea behind this project is that we can bring hundreds, thousands of youth to Ashley's office. The actual room where they upload the information to the rover for the drive for the following Mars Sol or day on Mars. You can be in the room with Ashley and her team and see how that work is done. But then you can also go to Mars and feel like you're there in Gale Crater, where Curiosity is. And the way we did that, so Forrest is my business partner at Hungry Mantis. We're a dynamic duo, and we have different skills. And so he has many skills, and one of them is working in a software program called Blender. Blender is a free software, and it allows you to create 3D models. And so NASA's blog has hundreds of free 3D models that you can download.
Wow.
And with a little bit of, I'm not going to say magic, but with a lot of skill and effort and some tutorials, you can take these 3D models and put them into a virtual reality environment. In our case, he combined a lot of different assets. So the Curiosity rover can take 360 photos itself with its arm and its different masked cameras. And so he took one of the 360 panoramas and made that the sky as you would see it from the Martian surface. And then we found like a 3D topographical map of Gale Crater. He brought that into Blender, used some artistic interpretation to create the look of the soil and the rocks. And then we got the 3D model of Curiosity, which is just like all ready to go, basically. Put that in there. And then we filmed Ashley in front of a green screen with one of our VR cameras.
Got it.
So she has this depth to her. So she's sort of like popping out in a 3D space.
Just freely standing on the planet's surface.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where she works every day.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It's so cool. And so, and then we, in pre-production, we decided we wanted to have a scene where she's surrounded by all the different rovers that have been sent to Mars so far.
Oh, cool.
And so she points to, okay, here's Sojourner. And Sojourner was about the size of a microwave. And then they get progressively larger as the missions get more complex. And so, yeah, the idea there was not only to bring you to a day in her life, but then bring you somewhere that, nobody can go. No human can go to Mars yet. So we're hoping that inspires youth to think about how awesome Mars exploration is, how cool NASA is. We also interviewed a scientist on the team. And so I think it's important for us to expose the fact that there's lots of different roles. She works in a team, and it's not just one person making those achievements. It's through the work of collaboration. And so hopefully the kids can see if they have an interest in space, there's something for them that they could do in the future.
What's fascinating to me, what you're talking about, is a level of immersion in storytelling that makes my brain kind of ripple out in a bigger 360. But thinking about the level of detail that you're thinking about around the history of the rovers and making all of the full immersive experience of not only what's happening around you, but your dedication to detail that what's happening in that space is creating a much bigger story for me than that immediate environment as well. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what storytelling opportunities VR opens up for our nonprofit organizations. I think a lot of people listening are like, that's cool, we don't have Mars. Right? That's cool, our kids don't want to be astronauts, or whatever that is,
Totally.
But what are ways that VR can help organizations think about their storytelling and take people places, even when they look around at their places and go, does somebody want to see this on VR? I don't know what that is. How would you talk to them about creating an experience for their viewer that they might not otherwise have?
That's a great question. And I definitely think it's important to look at virtual reality storytelling as a specific tool. There's lots of tools we can use in storytelling that have their strengths. And you were mentioning place. Place is a really big part of VR storytelling. If I'm going to go to the trouble of putting that bulky thing on my head, I want to be transported somewhere. Yeah. And I'd like to be with someone. I like people. So take me somewhere. Perhaps you're a nonprofit that has a mission that surrounds for example, there was a VR film made by Oxfam about 6 years ago about a rural village in Kenya that was having trouble accessing clean water regularly. And so I think it was Oxfam Australia that wanted to set out to make a VR film that would take their potential donors to this remote to them area to meet some of the people who would be impacted by the work that their donations would go towards. And so the story is told from the perspective of Evelyn, a 11-year-old girl, and you see her explain that in her village, clean water, it's like every 8 days they have access to clean water for maybe about 2 hours. And so you're right there with her. She's looking at you and you hear her voiceover narration explaining this. And she's a small child and she's carrying a water jug that's empty, that's like almost as big as her. And it looks very dry and very dusty. And you see her walking, and there's all these different shots, and they're paced very nicely of her walking. Finally, she reaches the place in the town where the water may be, but that particular day in the story, there is no water for her. So then you follow her, and she's looking for other water sources, but they're not clean. And you go down into like this ravine, and you see this muddy water, and there's flies all around it. And she's like, this is just what I have to do this week.
Yeah.
And that really hits you. I mean, it's one thing to read about that perhaps, or even to see a traditional video about that. You know, that could definitely be effective, of course. But I was like right beside Evelyn. And then you hear about a new initiative that's coming to her village to install solar panels that will help have better access to clean water through a type of pump that I just don't understand. I know about this technology, but not everything. And so, Oxfam is coming in. They're installing these solar panels, and you get to see that process. And then you get to see the people in her village around the pump, and they're trying it for the first time, and it just like explodes with water. And everybody is cheering and excited, and it's awesome. Like, it's really cool to see that full story arc, but to actually be there as well. And so if you go to Oxfam Australia's website, they have a link to donate. And the film, what's cool about this film, it's a VR film. It was made with professional virtual reality cameras, but because they put it on YouTube, YouTube has a 360 video player, and it's embeddable in any website. So they have the 360 video available on their website. You can watch it without having to put on a VR headset at all, and you can click around the sphere.
Oh, interesting.
You get an aspect of the immersion that way. Yeah. It's definitely a lot more powerful in a VR headset. But that's one example of maybe your nonprofit has a mission that is far away from where the majority of your donors are currently living. So it's like geographically expensive or challenging to get a lot of people there. And that firsthand experience is what is going to be so powerful for them. So that's one example.
I think that's super interesting to think about technology closing distance. That to me is the power of technology, right? When we use it to bring people together and closer together. And I'm immediately thinking of, all of our environmental nonprofits friends who perhaps are, doing conservation and the experiences they could give donors out in the middle of the heartbeat of these woods or whatever those things are. I just think intellectually it's really interesting for people to start thinking about how do we take this tool to close distance. And I think the remote idea is really fascinating. I think also just simply thinking about, we have so many nonprofit friends who have barriers to getting donors into spaces or for them to see experiences that could be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. If there's barriers to getting into spaces. So the 360 camera that we had on the table a little bit earlier, we took a 360 selfie. It's very, very small.
Yes, I was shocked.
Yeah.
The form factor is so tiny. I think it has a light footprint, and I could operate it from out there. So if there was a space that was maybe kind of like a sensitive space, like maybe it's a safe house or it's a place where people they're getting refuge from a difficult environment, and you want to show that this is a wonderful space that is cozy and inviting, and you want to bring donors in, but you couldn't do that when it's in use, perhaps. Like maybe
100 donors walking through their living environment. It doesn't work.
That would not be good. You could have this small 360 camera. An operator could stand outside of the room and record wirelessly.
So you literally, I watched her do it because I didn't quite, it's not that I didn't believe it, but maybe I didn't. You literally took the film from your phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you just, as you would shoot or tape anything on your phone. Same idea, operating the camera in a space.
And is it saving to your phone?
Yes.
So you can just as easily like share that, post that, create something out of it from your phone.
Yes. Yeah.
That's crazy.
The software that goes with these 360 cameras is quite nice in that way. Some of them allow that functionality. The more professional ones sometimes don't. But that camera is from Insta360, and they're a very popular 360 camera manufacturer. And they often have that great software that just downloads onto your smartphone that allows you to see the shot right after you take it, monitor it wirelessly. So instead of having a bigger camera with a camera operator right behind the camera, which if there's a subject in the scene might be like a little bit intimidating, the 360 could just be deployed in the room with nobody else, capture that panorama or 360 video, and you can give your donors, like a virtual tour, a walkthrough of the space. And that can be accomplished in a very short amount of time with a professional at the helm. And also, like if you have somebody on your team who's already skilled in video production, it's really not that much of a stretch if they have the enthusiasm
right.
to watch a few tutorials, rent a 360 camera, or maybe borrow one from an academic institution in your area. There's a lot of these 360 cameras floating around at universities and colleges in Portland. And so with a little bit of doing, you could probably get access to one, but also some of them you can buy used for as little as $250, which is not nothing, but for a camera of that spec is pretty good.
Yeah, that's
a lot
amazing.
less than I would have thought.
Yeah, that's what's kind of great about these tools too. Like this virtual reality headset on the table, this is a Meta Quest 2, and right now you can buy it at Target for $200.
Wow.
Now, granted, it's an older one, and it's not going to be supported like forever or even for... We don't know, because Meta is a company that makes a lot of decisions. We don't know what they're going to do. And this is not the newest one. And in the past, the older products, they're not supported always.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to get into VR and get a couple headsets and then get a cheap 360 camera, you don't even need like pro video support equipment. You could get a simple light stand, or maybe even something you're already using for social media, like a light stand that holds a selfie stick.
Like a selfie stick, yeah.
Or one of those lights.
The ring lights.
The ring lights, that would work, because with 360 filming, you want a really narrow tripod. It'll disappear between the parallax between the lenses. So all that is to say, the upfront cost of trying to get into 360 video, it's not like this prohibitively expensive thing that it used to be. I mean, it used to be that virtual reality headsets cost as much as a car.
Yeah.
And you could only access them inside of advanced research institutions, and they weighed like 10 pounds. And then that all changed in basically 2014 with the Oculus. And now, I mean, it's just getting better and better, technologically speaking. Sometimes it's getting cheaper. Sometimes it's getting more expensive. It just kind of depends on the quality of the headset. But man, we're in a really interesting time for this tech. And I think that everybody who likes storytelling should explore it. And there's probably something there for you. And you could start small. You know, sometimes less is more. It could be... It could be a series of 360 panos of spaces that are relevant to your organization. It could be something like that. I love the idea of bringing participant testimonials into VR and having people sit across the table from someone that, you know, it would be exhausting for them to tell that story maybe on stage in front of a lot of people, or just over and over and over again to donors. You can capture that and have that storytelling experience forever in VR. And man, when you're perceived in VR, it's a powerful experience. It really does feel like, you know, like we're sitting here together today. It feels like that, but in virtual reality. Oh, and you were talking earlier about the environmental organizations you work with. And I wanted to mention, so there's a lot of really impactful stories about the environment in VR that if you are such an organization that your goal is to show the consequences that our behavior has on the environment, you could get one of these and download a free experience that gives someone the opportunity to be a mushroom. There's an experience called Forager, and it's not currently available for distribution on this headset, but I think at some point it will be. the way these things work is they often start at film festivals, and then it takes like a year for them to be released. But Forager came out last year at South by Southwest, and they had people laying in beanbag chairs. They had the smell of mushrooms emitted in the scene, and the story shows
damp Northwest soil.
That soil is very good for fungi. And so the storytelling aspect was showing all these really, really advanced 3D scans of mushrooms as they're growing. And the goal was to inspire the viewer to care about mushrooms and to want to preserve the old growth forests where the soil is so rich for them to grow. Yeah. So they partnered with an organization called the Fungi Foundation. And that's one example. But there's been other examples too of, so the thing about VR is like we can be in another person's body.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
We can see the world from their perspective.
I mean, when you start talking about just the like ease of access, like you could go get a camera, I immediately started thinking about all the organizations we work with that try to tell a story of like the importance of an animal being adopted. And I'm like, I wonder if you could attach a VR camera to an animal and have the animal's perspective.
I've done that.
Or to a child, like an organization like an early Head Start program. What's the classroom experience like from the child's perspective? I mean, the opportunity there to me taps into a couple of things. It's a way, your first example was a way for them to actually enact their mission without the danger and risk of putting people on planes or space shuttles or putting them through a NASA program.
The expense of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The other side of the coin, your second example was really connecting donors to the work. So, a lot of what we try to do with donor connection is create a sense of empathy and emotional resonance. How do you think VR adds or detracts? Like, what is the potential with VR around creating an empathetic response to a mission?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I think that's what inspires me the most about this technology is how it could be used to increase empathy for others. I think at the heart of why I do what I do, I want people to discover things about themselves and other people and the world that brings about more empathy. So there's a book that I really like called Experience on Demand. That's
awesome.
For those watching on YouTube, it may or may not be over my shoulder.
It's a book by Jeremy Bailenson, who is a researcher at Stanford University, and he spent decades studying the effect of VR on human psychology, starting out with a focus on empathy and then later into environmental activism. But yeah, he's done quite a few studies. His students have done a lot of studies, and they ground their research in the psychological concepts like, for example, there's one called perspective taking, which has been shown to induce empathy in people. So that's the practice of putting yourself in the first person perspective of another person. And so there was a study done just with photographs in the year 2000 where people looked at a photograph of an elderly man, and half of the folks were asked to describe a day in his life, just write about a day in his life. And the other half were asked to describe a day in his life from his perspective as him. And so those participants afterwards showed a greater favorability or just sympathy and empathy for the elderly and showed more positive attitudes towards the elderly. So perspective taking is something that it's like an imaginative, creative process. You have to be proactive about it. You have to bring your own imagination into it. So that kind of begs the question, like, well, what if somebody has some stereotypes against the elderly, for example? What would they bring to the perspective-taking experiment? They might not bring more empathy because they're operating on information that is biased negatively against that person. Yeah. So virtual reality could possibly help with this by showing them the lived experience of someone and help them like have new information to sort of supplant the bias that they maybe carried. There was a study done in the Stanford lab where the study was to determine whether or not people who experienced color blindness in virtual reality would be more empathetic to people who have color blindness after the study. And so they had the control group of people who experienced color blindness on a 2D screen or just like read about what that experience is like. The people who were in virtual reality who experienced it, afterwards, they were more helpful to the colorblind participants when asked to help them with a website accessibility design. They were like twice as helpful. They spent twice as long assisting. So there's some evidence to indicate that being in VR does bring about more empathy, and perhaps it's because of that first-person perspective that people feel. To go into sort of the environmental aspect, there was another study done where you're in a rainforest and it's a beautiful, lush 3D virtual environment. And then you're handed an object in VR that looks like a chainsaw, and it rattles and shakes, and it gives you this haptic feedback. And you're asked to cut down a tree, and it takes like 2 minutes to cut this tree down. And so after that part of the study is over, unbeknownst to the subjects, the study's organizer, she was very pregnant at the time, like 15 minutes after they're done cutting down the tree, she accidentally spills water on herself, and then they measured how many napkins people used to assist her.
Oh, interesting.
And the people and the people who had cut down the tree used, I think it was like 20% less napkins. So
oh, wow.
They're trying to I thought the design of that study was very interesting. But they did other studies where you're a virtual cow and you're eating virtual hay and you're walking through your field, and then you get prodded. And then you have to go onto a virtual truck to the slaughterhouse, and then they measured their empathy towards cows and animals and like factory farming afterwards. So perspective taking.
Everyone a vegan.
Nobody wanted to eat a burger after that experience. So,
what I think is so fascinating about all this is it doing what we're often trying to do. We're gathering people and harnessing that energy and trying to close the distance between what's happening over here and where people are seated over here. And what's interesting about this is you're taking a solitary endeavor, right? Like theoretically, I could be sitting by myself in a headset.
Yeah.
But then I also wonder, as that amplifies, where there's many of us sitting together with a headset and that experience, and we can come back from the break and dive into that. But I'm just having these epiphanies of like all the layers of experience and how that's enhanced or not enhanced based on all of those.
Yeah, I do have a lot of curiosity about the experience of it, not just the filming of it, but also then how do you like show it and what that experience is. So we're going to take a short break for a message from one of our partners, and when we come back, we'll dive into that.
Great.
Awesome.
The Fundraising Elevator is recorded at the AV department in Portland, Oregon. For years, they've been our trusted partner, delivering exceptional audio-visual production and videography for nonprofits. In 2020, they transformed into a dynamic live streaming studio, producing more than 900 virtual and hybrid events. Now, we embark on an exciting journey together to bring you this podcast. Seeking the best in live events, video production, and live streaming, we proudly recommend our friends at the AV department. Link in the episode description.
All right, welcome back. We started to talk a little bit before the break about the experience.
Yes.
You mentioned experience a little bit when you talked about South by Southwest, but
yes,
you were having sort of an epiphany. Let's dive into that.
So my epiphany was before we started recording today with you. You brought in a headset. Like I said, I'm the Luddite. I don't have much experience in VR, so I put on the headset and I was experiencing it. While I was experiencing it, I was very aware of the fact that I was the only person in this whole studio sitting in the headset having that experience. So I was sort of in a moment, but also outside of that moment, looking in on the moment. So I'm curious about implementation of VR with groups. Like if we talk about a fundraising event or any kind of event, what happens to the experience when it's happening as a universal experience in a room of people versus
as a group?
A group. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite way of bringing VR to people is in a community screening, especially if that can be combined with a presentation or, an ask afterwards. I try to to give, because man, people are really energized after they watch something in VR. And when they can experience it with 30, 50 other people at the same time, as we've done with some of our VR screenings, it's wonderful because it's like going to a movie theater and then talking to your friends and family and loved ones about it after you leave the theater. But like you went somewhere and you went there together. So with these headsets, it is possible to, with different applications, there's one called Showtime VR. If you get a license for it, you can press a button and everybody is off to the races together.
Cool.
So there's a little bit of onboarding into VR. This is always the case as we have these devices that they're actually like quite personal devices. When you put them on, they need to fit you a certain way and be comfortable for you. So you need to give the audience a little bit of time to get into VR and learn the lay of the land. But you can set them up to be in something called kiosk mode. So basically all they need to do is put the headset on and then they can hear the voice of maybe their VR tour guide in the room, perhaps amplified with a microphone would probably be nice if it's a lot of people, explaining, okay, so make sure your image is clear. Can you see the Showtime VR logo right in front? All right, we'll just sit comfortably and we'll get the show started. And then, so I've had that experience. At the University of Oregon, they had a lecture series where they brought in one of the collaborators who's worked with a nonprofit called the Hydrus to show this really cool underwater exploration of a reef, and you can see some manta rays. And so I think it might have been 50, 60 of us. We all put on the headsets at the same time. And what was kind of cool about that was that he was guiding us and telling us about the experience as we were watching it, and he could pause it at certain moments and say things like, see that manta up there?
Oh,
okay,
wow.
Well, and tell us more information about that. So I loved this like narrated guide to an experience that we were all having together. That was super cool. Sometimes you want them to put on headphones and be in the story that you so painstakingly created that has different narrators and music and all the rest. It's a shared experience, but it is still individual because they're in there by themselves. There is the possibility and functionality to have avatars of each participant inside of a shared world and bring up a 360 video. There's different applications that allow you to do that. One is called Engage VR. And so that might be a little bit more suited to a classroom environment or, again, like a guided field trip type of experience. You still need somebody in the room who's going to help them all through it. But if the headset is in this easy kiosk mode where they just put it on and a film immediately plays, that could allow you to have a VR screening without a lot of additional facilitator support. The thing about VR that my company is starting to get excited about more and more is we can take our 360 videos and we can convert them to display on domes in planetariums. So we've been doing that a little bit recently with OMSI, which is the local science center here. And we had an experience, I think about a month ago, where some 360 footage and actually some just like traditional footage on a fisheye lens that we captured, we projected it into the dome and prepared it for that so that people are having this grand immersive experience, but without a VR headset. So if you're lucky enough to live in a town that has a planetarium, it's interesting. I'm still learning about, okay, how viable is it to bring educational experiences to planetariums? Because that's a whole world in and to itself. And there's a lot of laser Taylor Swift and things like that. But man, the planetarium, they were so supportive. They really liked having our audience in there. And there's a nonprofit in Portland called Outside the Frame. And they work with houseless youth who are interested in learning about how to tell their own stories with video. And so they had a really cool workshop for their participants a couple years ago, and we were brought in to help them learn about 360 video filmmaking. So they got a grant and they worked with Open Signal to facilitate this program. Open Signal is another great media organization. They do a lot with cable, broadcast cable access. So a few organizations coming together to make this happen. But outside the frame leading this. So their youth participants got a 360 camera. It was the GoPro Fusion. That costs like $200 now. Very inexpensive, really, in the grand scheme of things. And so the youth told their own stories. And some of their stories were fantastical. Some of them were personal. They got to decide what it would be. And the idea was that eventually those stories, we would help them edit it to show in the Dome Planetarium. And then that would be part of their gala fundraiser event at OMSI. And so they wanted to do it where that dome can seat almost 200 people, but they wanted to cut it in half so that people could face a certain direction and see. It's interesting, like when you can look everywhere and see something everywhere in the dome, you might miss something.
For sure.
So that was a really cool creative storytelling choice to say, let's do half of the dome. And that way there's a front for these stories.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of the stories did have a focal point in a particular part of the sphere. So it was really something else to see the youth standing in the middle of the planetarium, introducing their film. And then we're in it. Like I'm thinking of Jolly the Rapper. He made a music video to one of his songs. And the way he filmed that, we kept the camera in one position and he moved around the camera. And then Forrest helped him edit together like all these different instances of himself in a really cool scene in downtown Portland. And it's a fun video. There's a lot of like animation overlays, like butterflies flying around and a little sunshine cartoon. And yeah, Jolly got to introduce it in the planetarium. Hundreds of us, like 150 of us, I think, watched it at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was cool. So when we're thinking about immersive, there are ways to make that a shared experience. And even without having to have this particular technology involved. And then,
hold a minute on that technology. So the VR headset, you mentioned it's more affordable to be able to buy. But you are hosting screenings for like 35, 50 people. Mm-hmm. Is there a place where you can just like rent 50 VR headsets? Is that such a thing?
There are ways. There are companies that will do this and they're not necessarily. So I did some research on this for a potential client and I found few organizations local to Portland where I live, but I did find some that are national and the cost was a little tricky. I felt that, so what am I saying here? So yes, you can rent VR headsets for events. That's absolutely possible to do. There's an organization in Portland called Worlds Beyond VR that has a lot of headsets that works with Portland Public Schools and OMSI. I would definitely recommend them for our local listeners when it comes to like working with an organization that has a lot of headsets and has the knowledge to share films. And this is definitely an area of challenge for us as a company is like, how can we help our clients get a lot of headsets if they need them? Yeah. So sometimes our clients will like co-write a grant with them to get funding for this. So like we currently have 5 headsets, which is okay. Like that's decent. Yeah. There are some film centers in town that have, I'm thinking of Pamcut. They have 40 Quest 1 headsets. But the challenge with that is they got those a few years ago and those are older now.
Yeah, the technology changes so fast.
They don't work quite as well. So you can rent them. I think if my best suggestion for people who are looking to do this and activate this but don't want, like sure, if you have more money to spend, there are absolutely companies you can rent a lot of headsets from. Totally. That's the thing to do. It's painful to me to think about like the price per unit and what you're paying for maybe like one day. But also like I wouldn't want to advise someone to invest a lot of money in a technology that is not going to like into that specific gear. I think renting is a good option. Yeah. I would try I think working with an academic institution is a great idea because you could, so for example, like PCC has VR headsets. Portland State University has VR headsets. University of Oregon has VR headsets.
I'm noticing a theme here. Universities.
Universities often get headsets so that they can offer the best and emerging technology education to their media students. So I think it could be a very productive a productive activity to reach out to the university that's nearest to you, talk to their film department or their journalism department and see what kind of gear they have for the students. And maybe there's a way to co-devise something where the students get to learn about community engagement and they can put those tools to use, because I'll tell you, a lot of these headsets, they just sit around in the gear locker.
Yeah.
And they're not getting utilized all the time. And that's something that it breaks my heart, because there's so much to do in VR that's really compelling, but it kind of needs an advocate to bring it to people, right? Like you need somebody who's passionate about it to just bridge that gap. So I like to be that for people. So I wish I could, like, any of your listeners who are like, okay, I'm not in Portland. Man, she's saying some things that would be helpful, but I'm not in Portland. Like, that's why I'm thinking, okay, sure, you could reach out to the VR headset rental company. That's a thing you could do. Those exist, but I would try the university route and just see what you can find. Because I feel like when I was a student, the way I got into all of this, I was at the University of Oregon and I needed an additional credit. I was going to take a credit in motion graphics, and the professor canceled at the last minute. I was like, oh no, I need a credit. I'll do an independent study. I had taken a class that talked about VR journalism. It sounded awesome. I was like, okay, is there anybody in town who does this? Well, there was 360 Labs, and they're awesome. They're a local Portland-based 360 video production company. I went to them. I was like, do you need an intern? Because I need a credit, and this would be awesome. And so, then I became their intern for credit, and then they hired me, and it was epic. So, like, there are those students in all journalism programs and all film programs, like, they exist. So it's like sometimes it's just that person-to-person connection to bridge the gap there.
The other thing I'm thinking too is that when we're thinking about accessibility and renting headset, like, if you have a 200-person gala doing that. Yeah. But also I'm thinking about, always for our nonprofit friends, how do we invest once and how do we get many uses from, or a long lead on that, immediately I'm also thinking about, well, I just was talking about having an experience together and all experiencing it together. There is also something about a universal experience, but it doesn't necessarily all have to happen at the same time. Yeah. That if you create the film that can be how donors experience your work for a while, at your event, you could have a few headsets that are part of your pre-funk, where people can, and you can make that an experience that people go in and experience that video during the social hour in 2s and 3s, right? Oh, yeah. And then that becomes something that's rippling through the room. So while all 300 people are not doing it together, you're going to get half of them to go through and do it. But then you could also look at the investment in a headset for your organization, and that becomes part of your story tour for your donors coming in.
That's immediately what I was thinking of.
So that you've made the video, it might be connected to your event as a launch, but then that becomes a donor cultivation stewarding piece that you're using throughout the year to really sort of monetize and take advantage of the immersion of the technology. Yeah. Just trying to think of, how do we continue to make these great leaps forward in technology accessible and achievable for folks regardless of scale and what that looks like.
I love that idea. I love the idea of, you've invested in a story. It's an original story about your organization. Yeah. It's impactful in an immersive environment. It does something that the other tools in your toolkit just can't quite do. Yeah. It takes you to a remote place, or it allows you to do something that would be really expensive to have every donor do, or it connects you with one participant's story in a super profound way that you feel emotionally in VR like you couldn't feel elsewhere. You get one headset. You go to Target, you get it for $200, or you write a grant, or you get it used. Yep. eBay has some, even less. You can use it at your event, and you could hook it up to a laptop, to a monitor, and anybody who puts it on, other people could see what they're looking at.
Yes.
So then you have this
format.
In a 2D format. Yeah. You could also have a laptop that has YouTube open, that has the 360 video on YouTube. They can click and drag. You could give them the link. They could experience it on their smartphone. You can also, with all 360 media, you can take it into a video editor and just make a 2D version. Yeah. I wouldn't say if that's a thing you can do. I would probably...
It's not first choice
It's not first choice. Like if you are going to 99% be using it in just a 2D format, maybe just
Do
film
it 2D.
2D.
Yeah.
But you can go further with that content than just being in a 360 space. And so, I love that idea that you all are having about like, it could be just like less is more. You don't have to go crazy. Just start small.
The headsets don't have to be the limitation, the limiting factor, which I think is great.
I think the content and investing in some really great, compelling content that speaks to your mission that's the thing you really want to craft and think about.
Yep.
And it will be evergreen in a sense if you work with a professional because man, so when I started at 360 Labs, they'd been working in 360 video production for so many years, and they would always make sure to film in such a way that the resolution was high enough that it would still look good into the future.
Yeah.
And then we would see new software come out that would enable us to make our footage look better. So like they had stories of rafting the Rogue River from 2012 that we were able to make look really good in 2016. So if you work with professionals who know what they're doing, they will capture it in a way that lasts with the tech that is available to us today, right? So, and because YouTube has that 360 player, man, YouTube is just like people know what that is. And so you can embed it into your website. So it's like it can live there. You don't need some fancy third-party software to host the 360. These films can be private if you want to keep them and just load them onto the headset directly. You could publish them on some of the VR platforms. So anybody could find them and discover your work, which would allow you to reach maybe a different demographic than you're reaching otherwise. And I just love the idea of like I probably way more often show the film one-on-one to somebody who cares than to a large group.
Yeah.
And it's powerful, it's effective, and it doesn't have to take that long. And as long as you're familiar with the headset, you can make somebody else feel comfortable in there too. And it's just fun. I feel like I have the coolest job in the world.
You do.
You kind of do.
It's just
I'm kind of thinking
I
that
immediately
myself.
start to think about all of the applications for it. If you are doing work in an area where your donors are not, you can take them in a very real way to that location without an airline ticket. If you are building something that hasn't been created yet, but you're getting the capital for it, you could give them a 3D experience of a rendering.
Yes.
But then you could also tour them of the building that they invested in when it's complete. And then I think of, like you said, story tours. Tammy Zonker came and talked to us a lot on our podcast about story tours and the impact of just like connecting people to place and to each other in the work. And one of the things I think that could be so compelling is that your story tour could actually give people the experience of the youth you serve or the families you serve without asking the youth and the families to be there for every tour that you're giving.
Yeah.
So there's, I think, so many applications. We're going to take one more break, but when we come back, I want to ask you specifically about how people find you or other practitioners like you, that if they have a spark and an interest and want to say, what would it look like to create this thing? I want to know more about that. So we'll be back in just a moment to learn more about VR.
Loving the fundraising elevator, but wondering how you can talk to Sam and Kristen? Well, now's your chance to do it. Book one-on-one consulting time with Swaim Strategies experts Sam, Kristen, and Mary, and get all your event questions answered. Our team has you covered on strategic planning, fundraising strategy, storytelling, data tools, and registration support. Get the tools and the help you need to make the most impact at your fundraising event. Book at elevatenonprofit.com. The link is also in our show notes.
Welcome back to the Fundraising Elevator. We are talking with Rachel about all things VR. I'm learning a lot and having a lot of epiphanies on the spot. My hope is that our listeners are too. We ask everybody to jump on the fundraising elevator with us when they come on the podcast. Let's get in the elevator. Let's go up to the penthouse, which is always where the party is. Talk to us about an event you went to that was memorable to you and what made it memorable.
I love that question. I'm on the elevator. We're in the penthouse. Okay, so I have been really fortunate to go to different VR conferences. Awesome. And one of the first ones I went to is called the International Virtual Reality Professionals Association Conference. Oh my goodness, IVRPA. It's a long acronym. And that was in Tokyo.
Oh,
amazing.
Very cool.
That's the international aspect, right? And so it was fantastic. And what made it memorable, though, even though I was in Tokyo and even though I was with what you couldn't ask for like a cooler environment to be at a conference. Right. What made it memorable was Gerda, my friend who I met there, the people. The short answer is the people. I met this amazing VR director named Gerda.
I thought you were going to say Gerda was a VR friend.
My imaginary avatar friend. Well, that's funny. She's a real person. And so I remember meeting her at the coffee hour in between all the talks. Yeah. Let's get some caffeine, you know? Right. And I chatted with Gerda, and she was so kind. And it was nice to see another woman in VR filmmaking. Yep. I think we had a moment of connection just on that, you know? And I told her about a project I was working on, about a drag queen, Darcel. Mm-hmm. My colleague and I wanted to make a documentary that showed what life was like through Darcel's eyes. We talked about it with Gerda, and during the coffee hour, during the last party of the conference, she said, okay, well, what do you need to make it happen? Like, I'd like to be the executive producer.
Heck yeah.
And we were like, oh my God.
Heck yeah.
That was so memorable. And she's a mentor to me, a colleague, and a friend to this day. Because of that experience, I went to the next year's conference in Belfast. I got a travel grant to do that. Oregon, the Oregon Arts Commission offers travel grants for artists to go to conferences. So I got a grant. And then there I met another new friend, Alex Rule, who's based in the UK. And she's also a VR director. And we hit it off. So people. I've met the most amazing people and colleagues, and they become friends at these conferences. And these are sometimes conferences that are packed with programming, which is great. And it's just having that time and space to chat with the people who are there. Man, that'll never stop being impressive to me. And I'm so grateful I had those moments with them. They just as easily could have not happened.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the fact that I got to talk to those two who have then been hugely influential in my career, in my life, I'm so grateful that I just had a space to gather with people around the world like that. Yeah, I'll never forget that. So the people.
That's one of the biggest sort of centerpieces of gathering, the community aspect. And I love that. That's a great. That coffee could have been or not been, right?
Well, and kudos to the event planner, because I think a lot of our listeners are in the how do I logistically think about this? That thought, I need to make sure that there's gathering spaces for people, that they can socialize, that there can be just a sit down and have a coffee, a connection that isn't in the classroom environment.
Yep. Please give us those opportunities.
Yeah.
And that I feel must be kind of as an event planner, I'm sure there's a lot that goes into thinking about having, robust content, interesting, thought-provoking speakers, and that's all important. But I do feel it could be as simple as just give us the space to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And there, sometimes you'll go to conferences and it's I could learn something here, but I kind of already know about this topic. A lot of the people here are pros. I just want to be with the pros. And this is what drew them to the same geographical location for 3 days.
Yes.
So we just need to be together.
Yeah.
So sometimes the actual form, the education pieces and what the sessions are and how many, that becomes secondary. The real impetus is that's the pull, right? That's how people do that. So let's jump in the elevator and go down to the boiler room, which is where all the tools are. What is one tool you would advocate that fundraisers have in their toolbox?
Whoa. Oh my gosh, that's such a, what is one tool? A VR headset.
Excellent.
How could I not say that?
I think we we teed that up. Exactly right.
Get a VR headset. Get it used. If you want to get it new, you can. I mean, the MetaQuest 3. If you're looking for a new VR headset, MetaQuest 3. That's a good one. I have the MetaQuest 2, though. It serves me well. Get it used. You won't be so upset when 6 to 8 months from now, it doesn't work quite as well.
It's like your cell phone. You get a new one.
You get a new one. And I'm actually really excited. I want to talk to Free Geek soon. I know they're, I got to see them at the Elevate conference.
Yes,
so I was really inspired. Yeah, there's so many of these headsets that I think can be repurposed with the right technological know-how. So asterisk, I'm going to try to learn more about this. But I think you should get a VR headset.
I love it.
I love it. So folks, just hearing VR for the first time, may not have ever experienced VR, may not know anything about VR. So I have 2 questions for the novice. One, how do you experience VR if you've never done it? Like, what's an easy access point? How can you like walk into a place and experience it? And 2, how could they find resources or find you as a thought partner and sort of an ideator with them about what might be possible?
Great. So how could you experience VR? Like maybe try it before you buy it?
Yeah.
I have seen kiosks at Best Buy and Target where you could put the device on. So yeah, definitely try before you buy.
Right.
And there's a lot of great curators of content online who recommend things to try. It's wonderful to go in and explore, but I got to tell you, even as somebody who works in this field, I can get a little lost in there without my list of like, I want to check this out. And there's a lot of apps, and it's helpful to know which app you want to go into when you get into the headset. And different headsets will give you different access to different experiences. So there are a few publications I would recommend if you're looking to just see like what's out there to experience in VR. There's a publication called XR Must.
Okay.
They have really nice reporting on storytelling in VR.
XR Must.
XR Must.
Okay.
It's a must. There's a podcast called The Voices of VR. It's an excellent in-depth podcast. It's really in-depth.
Okay.
Just about any topic is covered there. So if you're curious about that I would highly recommend listening to that podcast. But yeah, if you go to Best Buy or Target, you could try a headset there. I think that in Portland, there's an organization called SETI, which has VR headsets that are available for the community to access if you become part of some of their programming, which is, I believe, free to do. So that could be one entry point there. Let's see, OMSI After Dark. I got to try VR at OMSI After Dark last night. And Worlds Beyond VR, they are the ones that facilitate that experience. And so OMSI After Dark costs $25. I think it's a discount if you're a member. But there's a lot of activities at those events, and one of them is VR. And like last night, I got to use my hands in VR, and I was a witch or wizard, and I was casting spells and making potions, and man, that was fun.
That's cool.
And when I took the headset off, I'm like, oh, I'm just back in this classroom in OMSI. Oh, dang it. I liked when I could make objects levitate. Like,
I love it.
It was super cool.
That's
so
great.
Like maybe your local science center will have a VR demo or activation to keep an eye out for. And then how to reach me and Hungry Mantis. That's my company. And so our email is hungrymantisvr@gmail.com. You can go to our website and contact us through there too, hungrymantis.com. We are always interested in talking to people who are curious about VR for storytelling or education or training or films, entertainment. I mean, pretty much like anything that has to do with stories in VR. Let us be your guide. Let us be a help to you in that arena. And so, I think our website and our email is a good way to get in touch with us. I teach a class at Portland State Film Department, but that's just for PSU students. I'm trying to think. I feel like I'm missing, let's see, the Voices of VR podcast. Also, my friend Alex Rule has a podcast called Alex Makes VR.
Okay.
It's amazing. It's like learn directly from a creator how to get into this field, even how to make money from that. So that's very like for the business side of things. And there's a YouTuber named Hugh, Hugh, on YouTube. His channel is called Creator Up, and he has hundreds of tutorials for how to get started. He's one of the best when it comes to teaching how to use a 360 cameras, and very responsive in the comment section. So
amazing.
We will put all of these in the show notes.
Yes. And I hope that folks reach out, and you might get a little overwhelmed with outreach, but I hope folks reach out to you to just brainstorm what's possible. Because I think, we're just planting a seed today. This is just a idea of what might be possible. But as folks start to think about, needs that they have, ways that they could connect people more directly to their mission. I love that you have stories where people are actually using VR to move their mission forward, but also to connect donors. It's such an incredible thing to think that this even exists. And so if you've never explored it before and you're interested, reach out, get to know Rachel a little bit, find out what Hungry Mantis can do, and even just start to understand the world of VR so that you can start to have ideas around ways that you could use it. But Very cool. You have been so generous with your time and have been coming to us over the years with ideas about what might be possible with VR and events. You've given me a lot of inspiration today. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the Elevate conference as well. We're so glad to be able to share your work with the world. And I hope people reach out and dig a little bit about what might be possible for their missions.
I would love that. I would love to be overwhelmed with email inquiries. That would be great. This is what I love to do. And this is kind of a fun fact. So I know about Elevate and the work that you do through ZP Productions.
Oh, yes.
Who are awesome
They're
storytellers.
One of our partners.
They're one of our video partners.
Yeah, so I want to say shout out to Zach.
Great.
Yeah, ZP Productions, amazing storytellers. So for traditional video, I mean, they knock it out of the park. I used to do some editing with them.
Awesome.
And I just love the mission-driven work that they do. And so, it's like there's always connections. There's always ways of finding like great organizations. And I can't speak highly enough about the Elevate conference. That was really helpful for me because, storytellers, we sort of know what we know about storytelling, but maybe not what we need to know about how to make the stories that have impact in your realm, in the nonprofit realm. So that was very educational for me. So I got to say, like, to any fellow storytellers who might be listening, the Elevate conference, invaluable for just getting into the mind of the nonprofit fundraiser. And that was, I definitely want to go back next year.
Well, thank you for bringing lots of ideas our way. And thank you for joining us on the Fundraising Elevator. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks for having me.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced in partnership with Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV department. The program is produced by April Clark and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson and Heidi Christensen. Video production by Chris Peterson, Whitney Gomes, and Nathan Bouquet. Video editing by Steve Osborne. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group, and support from Sophia Keller, John Lyles, and Andy Dowsett. Elevate, we believe in bringing people together. Our online learning platform for fundraising events has webinars, workshops, downloadable tools, and more, designed to save you time and stress when planning your next event. We're getting nonprofit, development, and event planning professionals the tools and ideas they need to create events that inspire donors and raise more money. So join us at elevatenonprofit.com. The link is also in our show notes.